Eleanor had always believed that love was measured in small, quiet things. The way she pressed her daughter's school blazer every Sunday night, the extra samosa she slipped into her lunchbox on exam days, the 500 Indian rupees notes she tucked into birthday cards even when her own pension barely covered the rent. So when her only child, Rhea, announced her engagement to Vikram Malhotra, heir to a 5-star resort chain, Eleanor did what mothers do. She smiled until her cheeks hurt, sold the last of her gold bangles to buy Rhea the silk lehenga she wanted, and never once complained that the wedding was in Goa while she lived in a 1-bedroom flat in Pune with a leaking roof. 3 months before the wedding, the invitation arrived. Or rather, it didn't. Eleanor waited. She refreshed her WhatsApp every hour. She called Rhea twice. Both times the girl sounded breathless, distracted, promising to send the card soon. "Mom, we're just finalizing the design." A week turned into a month. The official wedding website went live. Eleanor typed her own name into the RSVP list and watched the red words appear. Guest not found. She sat on her narrow sofa that night, the laptop glowing in the dark, and felt something inside her chest click shut, like a rusty lock finally giving way. The next morning she opened a new email account, attached a photograph of herself in a simple navy blue uniform, and wrote to the HR department of Malhotra Azure Resorts, Goa. Subject: experienced housekeeper available for wedding dates, 18 to 22 December. References available. Can work long hours. Discreet and reliable. They replied within an hour. They were short-staffed for the Malhotra Kapoor wedding. Uniform provided. 1,200 Indian rupees per shift plus meals. Report to the staff entrance at 6 a.m. on the 18th. Eleanor printed the email, folded it neatly, and placed it inside the old Godrej cupboard next to her wedding album. On the 18th of December, she landed in Goa wearing her oldest cotton saree so the airport security wouldn't look twice at the lone 62-year-old woman traveling with one small suitcase. She changed in the airport restroom into the navy uniform, tied her silver hair into a tight bun, and pinned on the name tag they had sent, E. D'Souza, housekeeping. She looked like any of the dozens of aunties who had cleaned other people's happiness for 30 years. The resort was a dream carved out of turquoise water and white bougainvillea. Eleanor kept her head down and her hands busy. She polished 100 wine glasses until they chimed like bells. She folded 200 napkins into lotuses. She smiled politely when guests asked for extra towels, and every time someone said, "Thank you, Auntie," she felt the old lock inside her chest rattle. Rhea arrived on the 19th. Eleanor watched from the service corridor as her daughter stepped out of a cream Rolls-Royce in a diamond-white gown, laughing that bright, careless laugh that had once filled their tiny Pune flat. Vikram's arm was around her waist. Neither of them glanced at the uniformed woman holding a tray of welcome drinks. That evening, during the Sanjit, Eleanor carried trays of champagne through the crowd. She passed within arm's length of Rhea 4 times. Once, Rhea even took a flute from her tray without looking up. "Careful, it's chilled," Eleanor murmured. Rhea rolled her eyes. "Obviously. God, some of these staff are so slow." Eleanor smiled the small, polite smile she had perfected over decades and moved on. On the wedding day, the beach lawn shimmered under fairy lights. 600 guests in pastel silk and French perfume. Eleanor was assigned to the cake table, close enough to hear everything, far enough to be invisible. The ceremony was flawless. Rhea glowed. Vikram's mother cried theatrically. The pandit hurried through the mantras because the photographer was on a schedule. When the couple took their 7 rounds, Eleanor counted them silently, the way she had once counted her daughter's tiny fingers the night she was born. Then came the reception. At 9:30 p.m. the lights dimmed for the cake cutting. A 7-tier masterpiece flew in from Dubai, rosewater and pistachio, studded with edible gold. The DJ killed the music. A spotlight hit the couple. Guests formed a perfect circle, phones raised. Eleanor slipped off her housekeeping apron, folded it neatly, and left it on a chair. Underneath she wore the same pale pink cotton saree she had married in 41 years ago, faded now, but clean and pressed. She reached into her cloth bag and took out the old leather-bound album, its corners soft from love. She walked forward. At first no one noticed. Just another auntie in a simple saree weaving through the crowd. Then she stepped into the spotlight, right beside the cake, and the photographer's assistant hissed, "Staff aren't allowed." Eleanor opened the album and held it high so the giant LED screens behind the couple caught every photograph and threw it across the lawn in high definition. The first image, a 21-year-old Eleanor on her wedding day, 1982, standing outside a tiny church in Pune. barefoot because they couldn't afford proper sandals, laughing so hard her eyes were shut. Her husband, Rhea's father, grinning beside her in a borrowed sherwani 2 sizes too big. Gasps rippled outward. Second photo, Eleanor at 25, exhausted but beaming, holding newborn Rhea wrapped in a hospital towel. Third, Rhea's first birthday, Eleanor in the same pink saree now patched at the hem, feeding cake to neighbors on a plastic table because they had no dining set. Fourth, Rhea at 16, sulking because her mother couldn't afford the designer gown everyone else wore to the prom, Eleanor in the background sewing a second-hand dress by lamplight. The screens cycled through 20 more images. School plays, feverish nights, Diwalis lit with 10 Indian rupees diyas. The day Rhea left for college and Eleanor stood alone at the railway station waving until the train disappeared. The lawn had gone deathly quiet. Even the waves seemed to hush. Rhea's face drained of color. "Mom?" The word came out small, cracked, like a child's. Eleanor's voice was soft, but it carried in the stunned silence. "You said I would ruin your aesthetic, Beta. That I looked old-fashioned. That your friends would laugh. So I thought I'd show them what old-fashioned really looks like." She turned a page. A close-up of her hands, those hands that had once washed dishes in 5 houses so Rhea could go to the best school, now zoomed across the screens. The knuckles swollen, the skin paper thin, the wedding ring long since sold to pay Rhea's MBA fees. "This saree," Eleanor continued, touching the faded pink cotton, "is the only thing I wore the day I promised to love forever. I thought my daughter would wear something of mine one day. Turns out she didn't want even me in the frame." Someone in the crowd started crying, quiet, helpless sobs. Phones lowered. A few guests put them away entirely. Vikram's mother tried to interrupt, shrill and defensive. "This is highly inappropriate." Eleanor looked at her calmly. "You paid for the cake. I paid for the bride. 26 years of her life. I thought I'd at least get to see her cut it." Rhea dropped the golden knife. It clanged against the table. "Mom, please, everyone's watching." "Yes," Eleanor said, almost tenderly. "For once, they are watching me." She closed the album and laid it gently on the cake table, right between the bride and groom. "I came to work your wedding because that was the only way you'd let me in the door. I served your guests. I cleaned up after them. And still you never saw me. But I saw you, Rhea. Every time you laughed at someone below you. Every time you called the staff auntie like it was an insult, I saw the little girl I raised disappear a little more." Her voice never rose. "It didn't need to. I'm not here to ruin your day, Beta. I'm here to return something you threw away." She reached into her cloth bag again and pulled out a small paper packet, the kind street vendors use. Inside were 2 modest gold bangles, the last pieces of jewelry she owned, bought with her first salary as a teacher. "I kept these for your wedding day," she said. "I was going to slip them onto your wrists during the bidarai like my mother did for me. But you don't have a bidarai when your mother isn't invited." She placed the bangles beside the album. Then Eleanor stepped back, out of the spotlight, and became just another figure in navy and pink among the pastel crowd. The silence broke like a wave. Someone started clapping, slow, steady, unmistakable. Then another. Then half the lawn. Not polite applause. The kind that starts in the chest and forces its way out because tears are choking you. Rhea stood frozen, mouth open, mascara beginning its slow descent. Vikram looked like he wanted the sand to swallow him whole. Eleanor turned to leave. As she walked back through the service corridor, a young waiter, barely 20, ran after her. "Auntie, please." He pressed a plate into her hands, a slice of the 7-tier cake, rosewater and pistachio, crowned with a single gold leaf. "You didn't get to taste it." Eleanor looked at the boy, at the cake, at the tears shining in his eyes, and something inside the rusty lock finally snapped open. "Thank you, Beta," she whispered. She took the plate and walked out onto the dark beach. The music had stopped entirely. She could hear the ocean again. Eleanor sat on the sand, kicked off the borrowed black shoes, and ate the wedding cake with the plastic fork the boy had given her. It tasted like sugar and salt and 41 years of loving someone who forgot how to love her back. When the plate was empty, she stood up, brushed the sand from her old pink saree, and started walking along the shoreline. The resort lights faded behind her. The bangles and the album stayed on the cake table like a quiet monument. By morning, the video was everywhere. Not the polished wedding highlights, raw, unfiltered phone footage titled "Mother Serves Her Daughter's Wedding in Uniform After Not Being Invited." 18 million views in 24 hours. Comments poured in from strangers who suddenly felt they knew her. She's wearing the same saree from her own wedding photos. I'm crying at work. That's not a bride's mother. That's a queen who raised a princess who forgot the kingdom. Rhea called 17 times. Eleanor let it ring. On the third day, a private car arrived at her Pune flat. The driver handed her an envelope. Inside, a first-class ticket back to Goa and a note in unfamiliar handwriting. The resort would like to honor Mrs. Eleanor Marie de Souza at a small ceremony. No cameras. No obligation. Just tea on the beach. Azure management. She almost threw it away. But something made her pack the pink saree again. When she reached the resort, the staff, every single one, lined the entrance. They didn't clap this time. They simply bowed, palms together, eyes wet. The young waiter from that night stepped forward and placed a fresh orchid in her hair. They had renamed the quietest beach cove Eleanor's Corner. A small wooden bench faced the sea. A brass plaque read, "For the mothers who were never in the frame, but always held the picture together." Eleanor sat there until sunset. She didn't cry anymore. She just watched the waves and felt, for the first time in years, wonderfully, painfully, completely seen. And somewhere far behind her, in a city that suddenly felt too small, a bride in an empty mansion learned that some absences echo louder than any presence ever could. The cotton saree fluttered in the evening breeze, still faded, still beautiful, still hers. And that was enough.